I got a lot of comments on the last two videos I did where I was talking about American politics and Christianity. Some of these comments were thought-provoking, some of them were moving, some of them were interesting or had entertainment value even, and I thought I would make a video where I take a few minutes reading these comments and responding to them. I'm going to start off here with one that actually really touched me. It was by Marty Berry, who leaves a very long comment on the video I did titled, "Is it already over?" For Ron DeSantis about Donald Trump winning the CPAC straw poll. And he says a lot in his comment. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I wanted to read a few points from it to comment on. And thank you so much, Marty, for sharing all this. He says, "I do tend to carry a very moderate view on life and believe that God has a plan for us all. Donald Trump can call himself a Christian, but in my heart I do not believe that he is genuine with it when he says it. His tendency to lie and his desire to make money over the safety and well-being of average people, to me, is very unsettling." You know, that's just such a good point there. It should be really obvious, I think, that the way that Donald Trump acts is contrary to the teachings of the New Testament. And right there, you know, we could make some decisions, make some opinions, and move on. And I wish Christians would have a little bit more simplicity and faith when viewing the world, because you know there's a lot of things that don't have to be complicated, don't have to drag on. You know, we can make decisions on things in a fairly easy manner, especially decisions on something like should we or should we not listen to some person who we're never going to have, you know, a personal interaction with him. He's not like he's a friend or family member. You know, we don't have to think about a long-term relation with this guy. He's a public figure who says things to influence the general public, and we can make a decision pretty quickly on whether he's right or wrong by matching up his words and his actions to the New Testament. And I think, as Marty points out here, it's a fairly easy case to decide on. He goes on to say, "There is a louder faction of the Christian faith that has latched onto the party and pushed it further away from what God would want." Interestingly, during the first months, even year maybe, of Trump's political career, a lot of Christians, a lot of conservative Christians, found him very off-putting and were not on his side, not in his camp, saw him as a danger. But that changed with a huge amount of influence from the moneyed interests of the American Christian churches. They have a tremendous amount of money at their disposal, and they use it in very clever ways to sway public opinion and to get people to vote the way that their interests would want them to vote. So these big money interests working under the name of Christianity were quite successful in Christianizing and presenting Donald Trump as a Christian leader, and sadly it worked to the point where to this day he remains very popular and a big name among Christian evangelicals, in spite of having a record 4 years as president where he did many ungodly things and used his power in a lot of ungodly ways. I don't necessarily believe that this new age of conservatism is healthy, and often tends to press hatred towards anyone who isn't like them. Now, not too long ago, I would have said that is a bit of an exaggeration. I would have said, hey, you know, tone that down a bit. But I am seeing it more and more that yes, what this current conservative movement does is encourage hatred towards people who are different, people who we don't understand. If we don't understand something, if we find it odd, if we find it different, then we work against it and work against those people, put those people down, regardless of how those people's actions may line up with the New Testament, or how our actions towards those people may line up with the New Testament. It is, sadly, a case of hatred pretty often. He says, "They are playing these people," meaning Christians, "playing them to strip them of their livelihood and directing anger at already vulnerable members of the community, such as the poor and homeless, the LGBTQ plus community, people of color, etc." Again, I would have called that a bit over the top a year or two ago, but um, I am starting to see things in this way. That is what the conservative movement is doing to Christians. It's manipulating Christians and getting them to be angry at these other groups that may not be like them. And it's a very sad thing, it's a very dangerous thing, and it's a very antichrist thing that is happening. Marty says, we need God more than ever. And the same people keep saying that Jesus will be coming back soon, while practicing the evil they warned us about. The second coming of Jesus is a subject that is very dear to my heart. I think it's very dear to the heart of most Christians, probably. And this point hits home so well because the whole point of the second coming of Jesus, the whole point of the book of Revelation, the point of the parables, Matthew 24, Matthew 25, it's about the preservation of a faithful church, faithful believers who stay true and loyal to Jesus while they await his second coming. If you take Jesus and faithfulness and love for Jesus out of the picture, then the end time and eschatology becomes a very dead subject. It's just kind of like a mystery cult where people get fascinated by these supernatural figures and these frightening events and the plagues and the judgments and the wrath and the beasts and whatnot. And that kind of stuff is fascinating and interesting because it is supernatural, and these are things that I expect that we will at some point be seeing in the world. But that's not the point of the end time. That's not the desire that Christians should have for the end times. The point of the message of the end times and the second coming is that we need to keep the commandments of Jesus and be worthy of being his sheep, being his bride, because he is coming back and he is going to be seeing what people did with the knowledge that they had. And like Marty says, the people who proclaim end time things the loudest often have the least regard towards the simple matters of obeying the commandments of Jesus, to do unto others as you would have them to do unto you, to not judge others, to have mercy on people in the same way that we want God to have mercy to us. Those are the things that are most important, and those are the most important things that we gain from the biblical message about the end times and the second coming of Jesus. He says, that's not the Lord's way. God is leading us. But when they ask him for guidance, it's like they tune him out and do what they want anyway. It can be a bit scary sometimes to listen to God, because God does speak to people, and God sometimes might tell you something that is very different from your own opinions. It's kind of like reading the Gospels. It's that experience of getting the pure message of Jesus, the pure message of God's plan for mankind, his plan for humanity, his plan for you and me. And that can be scary if we're holding on to something that is not in alignment with God's will. And yes, like Marty says, there's a lot of show of prophecy, of prayer, of charismatic and euphoric experiences, or that is a kind of a part of the culture of American Christianity. It's a big part of it, actually. Yet doing the will of God, doing something with those things that God tells us through his word, through the Gospels, that is lacking, and that's really sad, because the showy stuff is pointless if it's not serving any good purpose. If all that prayer and prophecy is not leading you to live out the sample of the New Testament, then it would probably be better if you weren't, making a show of the prayer and prophecy, because all that's going to do is lead people astray. Marty goes on to share some of his personal story about his experience with faith and with other Christians, and I'd encourage anyone to please read his full comment. It's very thoughtful, very humble, and really something I feel is worthwhile, because he took the time to share this. He says, "Pray for our country. those men do not speak for us, talking about Christian leaders. They do not stand for our values, and they do not stand for our country. It's about fear-mongering and grifting the next dollar from people who are already stretched so thin. Americans are resilient by fear. This is not the way we should go. We need a strong, steady hand to guide us, and those men aren't there to help. Real leadership means putting in the work, doing the hard work to do things the right way. It's easy to be a leader when it's simply attached to a title and an income and attention. And a lot of people want the attention, they want the title, they want the income, and they do very well at getting that and maintaining that facade of leadership. But I've seen it so many times in my own life where the so-called leader is so quick to leave the followers behind when he feels it's convenient for him, and leave people lacking, leave people wanting. And it's a warning for us to maybe not be so keen to follow these showy Christian leaders who are so persuasive and so good at getting people to follow them. Maybe we need to seek out humbler people who are showing fruits by their works, by their love, by the way that they put others above themselves, put others before themselves. Those are the kind of values that we should look for. And unfortunately, those kind of people aren't going to be very showy. They might not be getting a lot of attention, and they very likely won't be in politics or in any kind of big visible position. Marty says, "May God bless you, your neighbors, your country, and your channel. Thank you for letting me rant." Well, thank you so much, Marty, for sharing all that with us. Thank you for your rant, and I hope that we can hear more from you sometime. God bless you. Fritjof Speechgens says, "As an European, Netherlands, I followed the US election since a long time, Bush Sr. Personally, I do not think Trump as president would be good for America." Interestingly, Bush Sr. was the first president that I was aware of as a child growing up and becoming aware of current events and happenings in the news. Such a long time ago. So Fritjof here has been following U.S. elections for, this is now, 35 years or so. I actually had a good conversation with him some months back where we talked about the news from a European perspective. And I putting the link to the video right there. You can watch it. And hopefully I'll be talking with Fritjof again soon. Thanks so much for leaving that comment. David Betch says, "Trump and Lake make the perfect pair to run for election. They put the fun in dysfunctional." I kind of have to agree, in an odd way, there is something fun about the dysfunctionality of the Republican Party and these candidates. It's a little scary, though, because these people do win elections, and like they say, it's all in good fun until somebody gets hurt. Scott Ellert says, "Separation of politics and religion, and you are just spewing BS from the Christian Indoctrination Manual. That was written by a few white guys that wanted to control the populace." Well, I do certainly spew a lot from the Christian Indoctrination Manual, being the New Testament, and as far as it being written by a few white guys, these were first century Galileans and Judeans that wanted to control the populace. These early Christians, Jesus himself and his early disciples, they certainly had a lot of influence. They had a voice, but they used any kind of influence, any kind of authority they had in a very altruistic way. And I don't think you could accuse these people of any kind of ulterior motives of control or power. And all of them died for their beliefs, died for what they said. They did good and taught good, and it cost them their lives. So I would say that's quite a good example, quite a good sample, and should show the credibility of these people, that they were worth listening to. Chuck says, "Another pair of contestants brought to you by the Banana Republicans." Okay. The term Banana Republic that he's playing off of, that goes back to early 20th century, it was initially about Honduras and other Latin American countries, I think, that whose economies were based on exporting bananas and tropical fruits to the United States. So it's describing a country, a republic, a country that is founded as a republic with a constitution, with a legal framework of rights and protections and balances, where all that is kind of overcome and upstaged by some kind of massive economic interest that drives the country and takes away from people's rights. And it's not unfair to say that there are certainly elements of that in the Republican Party and in the United States in general, where business interests have an outsized influence over the country, and a lot of the ideals and aspirations of America and American citizens become secondary and subservient to big business interests. Jim Cantwell says, "The history books won't be kind to Trump nor Lake." Well, there are conservative and right-wing publishers who are putting out their history books, their textbooks, that are being kind to these kinds of right-wing politicians. When someone serves the world and serves the interest of money, serves the interest of power, the world is often kind to them and looks kindly on them and tries to make sure that they are taught as an example. Because what does the system want? The system wants people who are pursuing the dreams of wealth and power. So they hold up the people who attained as examples and teach that to the children, teach that to the people who watch the news, to try to make an example of the people who do the will of the world. Now, in the kingdom of God, I think it's going to be quite different. I don't think we're going to have history lessons where we learn about these great politicians and generals and conquerors and business tycoons. I don't think that those are the exemplary people in the kingdom of heaven. Incon Truth says, in response to Jim Cantwell, he says, "Oh really? How so? It seems to me that the further along we go, the left's attempt to sabotage Trump at the expense of the American people is being exposed at every turn. Just like with every other Marxist movement, history will not be nice to the Democrat Party. In fact, it's already playing itself out in real time." Once again, history does tend to be kind to the people that guide its power structures. So Republicans and Democrats are treated quite well in the history books. It would seem like from Ronald Reagan on back, all the presidents are taught in some way as being exemplary and something for Americans to look up to. And I'm sure as time goes on, Bush Sr. will come into that time frame, followed by Bill Clinton, then George W. Bush. These people who are very controversial sometimes while they're president, as time goes on, they get rehabilitated by history, by the system that they supported, that they guided, and they are taught as exemplary. So right now we're up to Ronald Reagan and maybe George Bush Sr. and all the presidents before them as being presidents who we learn about in a positive way. We hear quotes from them. Current politicians try to emulate them or reference them, and that's going to go on into Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and someday even Donald Trump will probably be held up as some kind of example. Maybe 40 years from now, he will be taught in American civic classes as a legitimate president with good intentions, and we'll probably have some quotes from him that will go down in history, and the same will happen to Joe Biden. Once again, as far as the kingdom of heaven is concerned, as far as believers who do the will of Jesus are concerned, that could all be quite different, and I think it's important to always make that distinction between those who serve the world and the interests of the world, and those who serve the interests of the people around them, and serve the interests of the betterment of the creation and of mankind in accordance with the will of our Creator. Democracy versus Theocracy says, "No one has the right to force their religious beliefs on someone else. That's true, in a way, because, interestingly, beliefs are enforced through the legal system. There are many, many laws that carry all kinds of enforcement measures that we are obliged to follow. Religious beliefs, at least talking about the beliefs of Christians as taught by the New Testament, are actually much briefer, much easier to follow, and I would say have a very positive effect if followed correctly. And they don't really work by forcing others to follow them. It's interesting the way that the kingdom of heaven works, the way the commandments of Jesus works. It's for people who are inclined to listen, people who are inclined to believe and to act on it, while the laws of the world, the beliefs that are enforced by the world, at best will lead to a somewhat stable, functioning society where people can work and live in some form of security, whereas the commandments of Jesus lead to a vastly better condition for the creation and for humanity. Nob Audi says, "What's more ridiculous, Trump or religion?" Well, I would say that religion is not very ridiculous. Religion as in our attempts to bring our actions and our minds and our bodies into submission to the will of Jesus Christ is a very positive and powerful thing and is not ridiculous in any way. Sunday Matinee says, "White evangelicals put Trump in the White House in 2016. They may put him back again in 2024. Yeah, don't count out the power and influence of the American evangelical movement. It is representative of a kind of Christianity that has a lot of flaws. There are a lot of very good people with good intentions who identify as evangelicals, but the power that the church wields over politics is extremely negative, and yeah, you can't count them out. They've done it before, and they can do it again, putting their people who enact their politics into power to the detriment of the country and the world." Philip Lynch says, "I think in this instance I would have to respectfully disagree with the video that I made. For evil to triumph, it is enough for good men and women to do nothing. As Christians, I believe we do have to engage with politics to a degree. I think we should vote for the person or party that we think will do the best job for the common good. It doesn't mean we have to necessarily get deeply involved if we don't feel called to, but we do have a vote and we should exercise it in the way we think is best." Good points there. A lot of us do feel quite strongly about politics, and through voting, we do have the means to engage in these subjects that we feel are important. He says, "Trump did win CPAC, but it was a pretty hollow victory as many Republicans didn't show up to it. The place was mostly empty compared with previous years." I wanted to comment a bit on that last sentence there about CPAC. I've heard that from other sources too, that it was fairly empty. The convention was not as well attended as in previous years, and I think it's just a lot of Republicans are still hoping to sit out the Trump era. They aren't excited about it. They see Trump as the face of the party getting all the attention, and he may well end up being the candidate again, and since 2016, a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives have been waiting for this Trump era to come to an end and go away, and it hasn't happened yet. A lot of poor Republicans are still waiting for that. Now, to be honest, I look forward to whatever comes next for the Republican Party. I think there can be some good contributions coming from an American conservative perspective, and I would hope that following the Trump era, we'll see a more sensible, more humanist, more libertarian-leaning, maybe, Republican Party. I can hope. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks so much for your comments. I hope to see more of these great thought-provoking comments from all of you, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye for now.